Top of the morning. How are you? It's a funny thing this summer because last year, you don't care, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I'm insecure about the number of people in the room. So last year, the 9 o'clock service got much bigger and the 11 o'clock shrunk. This year, we're only this is only the second week of summer, but last week, the 11 o'clock service was one of the biggest 11 o'clock services of the entire year, and the 9 o'clock was shrinking. So I think it might be the weather, but at any rate, welcome. We're thrilled that you're here. Happy Father's Day to those of you that are fathers or grandfathers. Great-grandfathers? Any great-grandfathers? Yeah, pushing it. I brag often about the fact that we're not a next-gen church, but we're not quite a great-grandfather church yet either, I don't think. I was in Baltimore this last week, Monday through Friday, and one of the speakers said something that I thought was funny, though maybe offensive. He said that grandkids are something it's the reward that you receive for not killing your children when they were teenagers. Well, that was awesome. So to those of you that are grandparents, good job. You get your reward. If you're a guest of this, welcome. We're thrilled to worship with you. We're a community that likes to gather on Sunday and wrestle with the text and who Jesus really is and what his dreams for the world really are, and then to spend the other 6 days fleshing that out. I suppose one of the things that we're constantly being confronted with, and myself this week, frankly, in some personal ways, is it would be really nice if truth was just, a principle that we could adopt. And yet the reality is that there's the intellectual piece, but then there's the real hard work of the fleshing it out piece. And so something we're constantly trying to remind ourselves of is it's not just about following Jesus from 9 to 10:15 or 11 to 12:15 on Sundays, or even in the confines of our own home, but trusting God out there in the everyday world. And frankly, we believe that the intellect is one way to know and grow in him, and serving others is another way, both to tell his story and to ourselves be transformed. You probably picked up by now that this weekend we kind of take pride in really honoring dads, fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, though we don't have any. So if you're a guest, welcome. It's kind of a unique experience to that end. So what we're going to do, kind of moving forward here, I'm going to talk you through a couple transitions. We're going to go into something that we call amalgamate, caffeinate. That's this opportunity to stand up and stir and meet people and greet people and fill up your coffee cup and run to the urinal or wherever it is. I don't think women have them, but you should. They're faster. And whatever it is that you need to do during that season. The unique thing that we're introducing this weekend is popsicles. I realize it's a little frigid, but it kind of ties in with Father's Day. It also kind of ties in with where we're going in the message content. And then outside of Amalgamate Caffeinate, we're going to go into a video that we've been working on, I say we, but mainly Lenny, for the last couple months. We had this idea a couple months ago of, man, there are a lot of remarkable men around this place. And one of the risks of highlighting a few of them is that we offend those of you that we didn't highlight, so please don't let yourself go there. But what we wanted to do is we just wanted to take 5 different types of men who are at 5 different places with fatherhood and give them a chance to kind of just collectively share wisdom. So we've got a guy who is 20-something, and he's going to speak to high school students in specific about their dads. And then we've got a guy who has babies and toddlers at home, and he's going to speak to men who don't have kids yet. And then we've got a guy with elementary-age kids, and he's going to speak to men who have toddlers and babies. And then a guy with high school students who's going to speak to those of you with elementary-age kids. And then a guy that has no kids at home anymore is just going to kind of speak to fatherhood in general. That's going to come in the form of a video after Amalgamate Caffeinate, and then I'm going to jump up here. I've got about a 20-minute little idea that I want to wrestle with together. So, ready, aim, fire.
What I wish I knew about my dad, or about my relationship with my dad back when I was in high school. I always knew that he wanted to have a relationship with me. I just didn't know how he wanted to have that relationship. My dad had this workspace, this workroom. It was like his fortress of solitude, inner sanctum, the holy of holies for him, down in the bottom of our house. It was his workspace. He had his workbench down there. It was under the house, so if there was something wrong with the house, he'd be crawling around down there. He always wanted, I think, me to hang out with him down there and work on stuff. Hey buddy, let's go do some work. Let's make a shelf. Dad, I don't want to, that's the Silence of the Lambs basement, man. The stairs were all crappy and led down to this nasty, gnarly, like I had to crouch. My dad's a little shorter than me. Like I had to crouch all the time when I was down there. It was just a dirt floor. And to me, it was like this place that was not interesting at all. I knew if I went down there, I was gonna get dirty. I was probably gonna whack my thumb with a hammer. I may stick a nail through some part of my body that I didn't want to nail through. Where it was his holy place. For me, it was the nasty, dirty Silence of the Lambs basement. And like my mom was gonna lower me lotion or something and be like, it rubs it on the skin. I don't know what it was gonna do. It was a creepy place. I think now I know that that's how my dad wanted to relate to me, was through getting together and making something. But I didn't know that. I just thought it was like, I need a hand with this. I guess you're the closest male, so jump in. But really, it was like, I'm reaching out. I want to do something with you. I want to relate to you. One thing my dad did teach me was that males and females are different. In an awkward car ride to Casper, Wyoming with a James Dobson tape. But what I didn't learn was the relational part of it, was that my mom wants to talk and my dad wants to work and do something and experience something together. And I wish that I would have known that. I think it's come to me now, and it's come to me later in life, where my dad saw a lot of potential and projects and things to do and things to make life better around the house. I saw a scary basement with some animal that was going to eat me. But he had a vision that I didn't. And I think part of the fatherly nature of God is that vision of creating something better and something that we don't always see, and something that takes us getting dirty and risking something to accomplish.
Thinking back on it, the biggest thing that I can think of is preparation for being a dad. I grew up, my dad, he had a dad that left very early, and so he was kind of the head of the household at an early age, so he didn't really know how to be a leadership figure. In his own way he did, and he tried hard, and so nothing against him, awesome guy, but he didn't really have that extra taking authority or taking leadership in a good, healthy way in the family. And just dug into that, like, what can I do to prepare myself to be that dad, to be that husband that could be the head of our household, as a godly head of our household. Authority in a healthy way, not in the like I'm the boss and that's it way, but the biggest need as fathers is a leadership figure, a good godly example of a head of a house, and leading in prayer and leading in love, and not be afraid to show affection and love to your children, to your spouse. That's one thing that I just had to push through from my upbringing, just really almost feel like I was gushing, but I think it's healthy. My kids are very affectionate, very, very open with their feelings. Our culture a lot of times has a tendency of blaming our parents for everything. I'm a schmuck because my dad didn't hug me enough or whatever, but taking those things that he did awesome and building off of those. Becoming a dad made me look at the positives instead of, like I said, looking at what he did not do, and realize what a task he did have. My oldest is very strong-willed, and now I see what I put my dad through, and I respect him a lot for that. So even though I didn't have maybe the perfect example, we can all look back and draw example from whatever father figure we had in our life, even if our father wasn't there, and draw from that and take it forward.
My advice to parents of preschool and toddler-age children, things that were important to me in our success, was probably, first of all, having a great wife, and probably our conscious effort to be consistent and to base all the decisions we make on raising our family around God's Word. If you're faithful to God as you raise your children, He'll be faithful to you, especially with young kids, and establishing the rules, discipline. It's not always easy. I can remember sitting and watching Jonah with carrots in his mouth for 20 minutes, a half hour, an hour after dinner, because we said you need to finish what's on your plate. It's not always easy when your kids are laughing and talking when they're in bed. You have to sit outside the door 20 minutes, a half hour, an hour when you'd rather be doing something else, and keep knocking on the door and tell them to be quiet. But God is faithful, and now that my boys are 11 and 9, we knock on the door once, tell them to be quiet, and they're quiet. And they eat their food at dinner time, which isn't surprising because they're boys and they're growing. Having the support of other Christian friends who are going through the same stuff, have someone to talk to is always important. Things that I think, looking back on it, you wish you could do differently. Spend more time with your kids as much as you can because they grow up really fast. When I was asked to talk about raising toddlers and preschoolers, it took me a while to think back and remember what raising toddlers and preschoolers was like, even though it was only 4 or 5 years ago. Things change fast. They grow up really fast. Spend time with them. And along those lines, find things to do that you both enjoy. Don't force them to do things only you like, and don't always just do things that they like. I look at my relationship with my father, and my dad and I still go fishing. It's something that he and I did when I was a kid. We still do that now. Easter weekend we went out and went fishing. And those are the kind of things that I try to do with my sons. A lot of our activities are outside. We fish, we camp, we go hiking, snowboard and ski. And just having those things at that age, that young age, get them involved. In elementary age where my kids are now, and even in high school, it's not always easy to talk to high school kids, but if you just say, hey, let's go skiing this weekend, and you're sitting on the chairlift, I think those conversations will come easier.
Being a parent 20 years ago to now, the things that I would have done different back then are patience. When I was younger, I was busy being a young professional, trying to make a living and raise a family, and my children probably didn't get the patience they deserved. If your kids are misbehaving, you think that other people are worried about, you think that, that they're worried what's going on, or you're a poor parent. I don't stress too much about that anymore, and I wish I had known that 20 years ago when I had kids. I had toddlers at 20 years ago, and I've got toddlers again now, so I've gotten to relive that, and I'm doing that different. I'm showing a lot more patience. Maybe some people don't appreciate that, but it's easier on my children and also my wife and I. Those of you dads that have elementary kids, after being split for 20 years between elementary kids, I've seen a big change. It used to be, maybe there was a bully on the playground, but now you have bullying through texting, through your computers, and a lot of times your kids aren't going to let you know this. If you spend good quality time, individual time with each one of your elementary kids, they're going to talk to you, and they're finally going to tell you about what's going on in their lives. And if you don't, they might never tell you that they're getting bullied. There's a lot going on in their lives, and I would say stay in tune to their teachers, their administrators. Ask a lot of questions, because through a lot of experience I know that things go on that they don't want to tell you because they feel like they're going to disappoint you. Wisdom for fathers that have high schoolers or starting high school. Hug your kids, because you probably aren't going to see them for 4 years. They're going to get busy, and you might take that as they don't want anything to do with you. Don't think that you have done anything that keeps them from, wanting to spend time with you. That's just the nature of high school kids. Stay very involved in their lives, though. Try to get them out individually, whether it's over a lunch or a supper. If you have daughters, a date night with them. And when they have your trust, they'll tell you things that they would not normally tell you, if you're just sitting around the table. Sometimes it doesn't seem fun when they're in high school, but really, when you look back, there's a lot of great times that you have with your child. Some great times that I've had is riding in a car with my daughter to a basketball or volleyball tournament, and we talk for, 300 miles. I didn't realize my kids were, that adult-like. When they can sit there and talk to you without being around their friends, you find out how close to adults they really are. Just spend some really, really good time, and don't be afraid to ask questions, because they want to be noticed. They want you to be involved. They might act like they don't, but they really do.
I think the first thing is you should find yourself a wise and beautiful lady like Andy to marry. And Follow her wisdom. Kids first, career second. Realize that raising them is the most important job you'll ever do. I, of course, had the luxury that if I wasn't there, maybe just a few fish would die, but I think that was a choice on my part. And whatever way you can, try and put those kids first. Attend and celebrate every performance you possibly can. In my case, with 3 girls, I got to watch them from the stage where they're just a bunch of tots in kind of an amoebic cluster that jumps around and squeaks till they became beautiful ballerinas and jazz dancers with golden voices. Find a good church with a great kids program. They'll fill in the blanks for knowledge that you're always going to create, and then they might even demonstrate the good character you wish you had most of the time. Develop some family traditions, whether it's dyeing Easter eggs or cutting a Christmas tree, or in our case, we'd always go to Yellowstone National Park and get a room in the old part of the Old Faithful Inn. When we were done geyser gazing for the day, we'd settle in there at night when everything was quiet and peaceful and looked like 100 years ago. Could listen to the piano player and play a little cards, and then at night you get the pleasure of listening to the people snore next room to you, and you go down the hall to go to the bathroom. So those are all real worthwhile memories. Remember, despite what you might do with your kids, they're still going to go through that hormonal and chemical insanity period known as the teenage years. In my case, with a wife and 3 daughters, and they had 3 rabbits, all female, and a female dog. Even had 1 goldfish of questionable gender, but I suspect it was female as well. And what I would call it was my daily estrogen festival. And you just have to learn to enjoy it. If they're girls, you most certainly need to warn them about the motivations of the boys around them. You know they're not good, and you need to tell them that. If you're fathers of boys, you need to remind those boys that fathers of girls know exactly what you're thinking, and we don't like it a bit. Choose your battles carefully. Remember that strange hair and wild clothes are a lot better than permanent tattoos or large piercings. And I'd say above all, keep your sense of humor, because it beats the heck out of crying continuously. And it's also a very useful tool to use to embarrass your children at odd moments. For the do-overs, I think I would insist on more pigtails. There's just nothing better than small girls with pigtails. I'd ask for a padded seat at Nutcracker performances. The dance instructor said that I set a record for the number of performances attended with 3 girls over a long period of time. So I think I deserve a padded seat. I might try hops gun oil as an aftershave to see if that couldn't put a little more fear in the boys that would come over. I would certainly try to pray more and worry less. I'd advocate for less work and more fun. Never seem to quite keep that balance, but it's certainly a worthy goal. What I'd do again? Well, I'd certainly marry Andy again, and I'd try and praise her more for the great job she did raising the kids. I'd keep our traditions and hope that they pass those along. I would keep family first. It seemed to work well for our family. And I'd certainly, again, thank God for all the blessings He gave us. So that's it.
Lord, thanks for this community that you've assembled. Thanks for fatherhood. It's your idea. Thanks for the encouragement that comes from hearing other guys speak candidly about it. Lord, I know I speak for all of us who are dads and even looking to be dads, knowing that day's coming. It's an overwhelming task. And so we pray that you'd put some wind in our sails and some courage in the tank this morning. Thanks for family, Lord. Amen. That's neat, huh? Good job, Lenny. Todd, who was the second to last guy, he told me when he was done filming, he said, Adam, what I really wanted to say that I didn't say was that if you want your kids to grow up and live well, that they need to be Raiders fans. And I was like, dude, that would have been so funny. Because I'm a Bronco fan, and most of you know that because I talk about it too much, and he's a Raider fan, and I know that, and we kind of have this thing, and he didn't know my sense of humor well enough to know that would be okay. So I said, well, I'll tell him, because I think it's a lie from the pit of hell, but I mean, it's funny too, right? Just kidding. Okay, so I alluded to the fact that I was in Baltimore this last week, and I'm going to kind of save that for Vision Weekend because it's such a fun, kind of the why, it's such a fun kind of look into what God's doing with us and our community, I think. But one story that I will tell that does tie in was I was jumped by a gangster. I think he was a gangster, and I'm not lying. So I left Monday morning at 6 a.m., exhausted already. I'm kind of a head case, so I was like a freak the whole time I was there. And the whole experience was blessed by this great beginning to the day, or the whole trip, because on Monday afternoon, of course, I was there by then, and then there were a few people, and I was there with a bunch of people I didn't really know other than Drenda before the trip started, and Drenda's a gal who works with the school district and is part of this community as well. So a few of us were there by Monday evening. We grabbed dinner together. We finished up dinner, and myself and two other gals decided to go for a walk along the boardwalk. So we're in downtown Baltimore. Freaky place, I'm just telling you. But it's kind of the touristy part of Baltimore, kind of this new boardwalk, kind of laid with brick. And there's people around. Like, there's tourists around. It's also like 65 and 100% humidity. That's a tangent. So the 5-second version is, dude walks up to me, takes a cut at me. I duck, for I'm ninja, and keep walking. The long story is this. So my wife, my phone rings. I answer my phone. It's my wife. She's kind of bent out of shape because I left her with the less than ideal scenario with the DVD player, and it's movie night with some gals. And so I'm talking to my wife, and the three of us are walking side by side, and I, in hindsight, look up ahead, and there's this like group of about 15 to 20, upper teen, lower 20 men, mostly African American men, just kind of most of them wearing wife beaters, and I'm not joking. I didn't think of any of this. So I'm walking along, I'm in tourist town. And in hindsight, this dude about 15 feet away just totally locked eyes with me. I didn't think anything of it. And then I was waiting, to kind of cross each other. Well, as our kind of crowd went through their crowd, he just kind of full on took a swing at me. I ducked. He got me in the back of the neck. I jumped up and put the two women I was with between myself and him. Kind of ran over this way. It was mostly instinctual, but I'm clean because he was after me. I was actually texting a friend about that this week, and he's like, dude, remind me to never let you go for a walk with my wife. and then one of the gals that I was with, who's 50-something and counselor, kind of, that type, so she's between him and me, and she's talking to him, and as I ducked and got hit, I literally thought, like, oh no, this is one of those gang initiation deals. Then luckily, like, the 15 or 20 guys kind of grabbed him, and I don't know like whether he was having some bad trip or what it was, but literally they kind of grabbed him and pulled him away. And I put the ear back to my phone and went like, hey, so are you still there? And Teresa's like, yeah, I'm still there, and figured out that I couldn't help her and told her to call my friend Johnny, and I hung up, and the lady's next to me is like, you didn't even tell your wife, you just got like, jumped by a gangster. And I was like, what am I going to say? Like, hey, you can't talk, gonna die. So the whole thing started messy. Speaking of messes, it's kind of what I want to talk about this morning, because I don't know, I can't recall exactly what type of mess I was looking at. I don't remember if it was like a popsicle stick in the middle of the yard, or whether it was sidewalk chalk that wasn't on the sidewalk but was on the side of the house. I don't remember exactly what type of mess it was, but it was a couple months ago. It was a Monday afternoon. Teresa typically works Mondays. That's my day off. And I had this moment where I was about to get really frustrated with yet another mess, when I felt like God whispered to me. Now, I don't mean audibly, and I don't typically talk in that type of super spiritual language, but I mean literally, I felt like God clarified some things for me in my soul. It was this revelation, I suppose, this epiphany, maybe that's too dramatic, that for me has really changed the way that I'm thinking about relationships in general and parenting in specific. Now again, I don't remember what kind of mess it was. I might have tripped over the bike that I told, you tell the boys, put the bike inside the garage, and so like fair game is like literally inside the door jamb, so you trip over the bike, right? Or I might have been looking for a screwdriver, and none of them were in the drawer. I don't remember exactly what type of mess. It could have been like sweeping up the perpetual mess from underneath the floor or underneath the table, or standing there in the kitchen going, like, Teresa just swept like 3 minutes ago. How does this happen? How does all this food end up on the floor? It might have been a like fermented pull-up from the evening at 3 in the afternoon. Not sure exactly what type of mess. It could have been vomit, because we've not outgrown vomit at our house. Sometimes we're privileged to deal with vomit at midnight, so it could have been vomit. It could have been sidewalk chalk on the side of the house. It could have been a lot of different things. It might have been, because this one drives me crazy, toothpaste plastered to the side of the bathroom sink. Because for some reason, those extra 2 seconds, right, like, there's not time to like get your toothpaste down the drain, because none of it ever really hits your teeth anyway, because it's on the thing, in the mouth, falls under the sink, and then like crystallizes there, right? Might have been another unflushed toilet. That too could have been the mess. Fortunately, I know it wasn't a poopy diaper, for praise the Lord, we are beyond those days. I also know it wasn't a teacher who was on the phone telling me about the mess that my kid had made of another kid's face. Though those days might be coming, I don't know. I know it wasn't a store manager telling me about the mess that they had made by putting stuff in their pockets. I know I wasn't looking at the dad of a high school girl telling me about the mess that my kid had made of his daughter's heart. Like, I know I wasn't looking at a wrecked car, nor was I looking at a kid with alcohol on his breath. I know it wasn't any of those messes, though they could all be coming. But there was something big, and it's kind of where I want to go this morning in just a little bit of time we have left. Now, I don't know what the relevance is for messes with you. I mean, if you're a parent, right, like, it speaks for itself. You're already with me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You could get up here and literally talk about the messes for hours and hours and hours and hours. And maybe you have babies at home, and maybe it is something as, like, supposedly trivial as, like, a dirty diaper. Maybe you've got one of those kids who figured out how to empty his diaper with his hand and throw it in his room from the crib. You laugh, but it happens, and your day too is coming. Maybe you don't have toddlers at home. Maybe you have elementary age kids or even high school kids, and the messes aren't as trivial anymore. I mean, the potential messes are much more catalytic, much more potentially life-changing. Maybe you're someone that is yourself an empty nester, or you don't have any kids at home. And the messes, like, they're nothing to laugh at. Whether it's financial decisions or relational decisions or substance decisions, they're huge. Maybe you're not a parent. Well, what I would submit to you is this applies to relationships in general, because to have relationships is by default to be affected by the messes that other people stir up. But what hit me in that moment, and actually I remember exactly what I was doing, I was staring at a popsicle stick, hence the popsicles. Though I had one person say, like, why popsicles? Pop? Ha-ha. And I was like, no, we didn't think of that. I was staring at a popsicle stick. I'd just spent about 90 minutes cleaning up the backyard, mowing the grass, and I don't know why, but popsicle sticks in the middle of the yard drive me bonkers. I've threatened, like, if I ever find another popsicle stick in the grass, there will never be another popsicle stick in this house for as long as you live. I don't follow Clint's advice because I don't ever follow through with that. I was staring at a popsicle stick, and that, like, frustration, fury, anger was boiling up. And what hit me in the moment was, Adam, like, you resent it when other people make messes that affect you. In particular, you resent it when your kids create messes that affect you. And you know, this is kind of like that deal in Baltimore where, like, it takes 5 seconds for the whole thing to happen and 20 minutes to kind of unpack it. What hit me in that moment was the realization that in resenting the messes, the message that I send is I resent the mess maker. That you can't separate those two things. And again, very intuitively, very quickly, what I began to wonder is, wait a minute, doesn't the God of the text, the God of the Bible, God the Father, and Jesus in the Spirit, like, doesn't that God, doesn't he relate to me in a 180-degree different way? I mean, just think about the early pages of the text. Go back to Genesis 1, 2, and 3 in your mind. Perhaps you're not familiar. Right, like, it's in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 that we got the culture wars, though that's not what we're going to talk about. It's also in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 that we get God creating. And my interest isn't necessarily how he created, but that he created. That it's not an accident, that it was intentional. That God wasn't just playing around, that he was doing something very, very specific. And he started creating. He created land, he created sea, he created vegetation, he created animals. And yet the more we learn about science, the more we learn that that does a grave injustice to what he did. Because every time we zoom in just a little bit more into the ocean, we see the beauty and the intentionality. You know, every tropical fish tank shows us that, wow, he didn't just, like, create fish. I mean, he was there with the finest, most pixelated paintbrush, and he was creating incredible beauty, incredible detail. And then he did what every parent, what every person who has a relationship has done. He invited kids, he created kids, and asked them to join him in that. So he built a house. And it wasn't just any house, it was his dream house. And he didn't just say, like, just build it. He had attention to every detail. He finished a car, and it wasn't just any car, it was his dream car. Everything in its proper place. He planned a vacation, if you will. And it wasn't like, well, this kind of whatever. It was a great plan, and it was a detailed plan. And he invited people into it, his kids into it. We call them Adam and Eve, and I love the picture of, like the way I've always pictured that is God with his hands over the shoulders of Adam and Eve, looking out over creation, not saying protect it and keep it like this, saying move it forward, put your hands in the soil and make something of this. The picture in Eden, as we talked about before, is not one of like just kind of keep it like this. It's like I've given it a direction, join me in that direction. But what'd they do? They made a mess, a big mess. And what we get in the next several chapters through chapter 11 of Genesis is this very vulnerable picture of God contemplating, what will I do with the mess? And the authors even allude to like him contemplating just destroying it and starting over. Now is that, we can get into the emotion of God, we won't. But in Genesis 12, he makes a decision that while he doesn't like sin, which is a total separate conversation, is the realization of my realizing that not all messes are sin and not treating them all as sin. Though he doesn't like sin, he's going to refuse to resent his kids. And in fact, he doesn't say, whereas I resent sin and am angered, or resent messes and am angered towards messes and push back on messes and generally remove myself relationally and emotionally and go, that's your problem, I'll like you, love you, be intentional with you again when that popsicle stick is picked up. But until then, I have the right to treat you poorly. God kind of does the exact opposite. I would argue that, like God, I mean, he's at his best when we're at our worst. I mean, you think about the grace of God, and there's this crazy question of like, how much would we not know about God were it not for the messes we create? Which brings us back to Paul going, so should we sin? And he goes, well, absolutely not. But the point is, like, God was at his best when we were at our worst. In fact, it strikes me, and I don't know how far you can go with this line of thinking, that it's almost like God anticipates the mess and tells himself in advance, there's going to be a mess, and I'm going to join them in the mess. Now, parenthetically again, we're not saying like absolve or get rid of all consequences. We're not saying that he never says like, wow, you're going to have to get a job to pay for that bumper. Whoa, that's going to hurt for a while. Whoa, that's expensive. That's a separate conversation, but he draws near. I would suggest that maybe the greatest story in the text about a God who draws near despite the messes is in Luke chapter 15, a story that, again, probably many of you are familiar with, a story commonly referred to as the prodigal son. I just want to read it to you. Jesus says, then he said, there was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. He made a mess. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through that country, and he began to hurt. He signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to his fields to slop the pigs. He was hungry. He was so hungry he would have eaten the corn cobs and the pig slop, but no one would give him any. That brought him to his senses. He said, all these farmhands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've made a mess. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. He got right up and went to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. Why? Because of a mess. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to his servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here, given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found, and they began to have a wonderful time. All this time his older son was out in his field. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of his houseboys, he asked what was going on. He told him, your brother came home. Your father has ordered a feast, barbecued beef, because he has him home safe and sound. The other brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, look, how many years I've strayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief, but have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then this son of yours, who has thrown away your money on whores, shows up and you go out with an all-out feast? His father said, son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time, and everything that is mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we had to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and he's found. Now, as has been pointed out by many before me, this is one of the most the mistitled stories that Jesus ever tells, because it's not a story about one son, it's a story about two sons. And really, it's not a story about sons, it's a story about a father, because one son assumes that he's disqualified himself because of the messes. But the other son is in just as much error in assuming that he's qualified because of the supposed lack of messes. The story is about a father who goes, there's messes. And it's almost like he anticipates the messes, and then he says, I'll enter them. I'll join you in them. I'll navigate them. I mean, isn't it almost like that's who God is on a personal level? And I know that we run the risk of sounding really self-centered when we say this, but on a personal, intimate, everyday relational level, why is it that God draws so near when we're in a mess? I mean, isn't that what he does best? Maybe best is an overstatement. Well, is he helps us navigate messes. I mean, what if as dads, as parents, as friends, as people, we refused to resent the messes? Like, what if we just said we're not going to do that? I had lunch with the dad. It's been a couple months ago, and this thought was all very new in my head. And he had a high school student who, if I could tell you the story, you would all go like, worst nightmare lived out for that dad. And as he's telling me the story and kind of going through what had gone on, and he didn't get into a lot of detail, but just kind of alluded to the fact that he was angry and he had sleepless nights and he was frustrated and he was scared and he was confused. Like, emotionally, one of the things that became very apparent, and I said it to him eventually, was, wow, but I've not once sensed that you resented her for the mess. Like, never once did I pick up from him that he in any way resented her for creating the mess. And in fact, the intentionality that he exhibited in navigating that kind of revealed this idea that I've been looking at, that a dad's job, if nothing else, is being available in the messes. Now, separate conversation needed to be intentional in helping them avoid messes? Absolutely. But the reality is there's going to be messes. What if we treated messes, and now I'm just kind of letting you into my head, like what if we saw messes as practice? From the diaper to the spilt milk to the crumbs on the floor, practice. Practice on our end to say, like, I'm not going to resent messes. I'm going to assume that they're coming my way, and giving all my energy to managing a lack of messes will be wasted energy. But practice also for our kids, that they would learn in the process that when the mess is real, when it's not nearly as trivial, that we've taught them, like, yeah, he's there. Like, yeah, I mean, there will be consequences, but we've taught ourselves that their greatest resource is their dad to navigate the mess. Like, what if we refused in our friendships and at work? What if we refused to be the person who would not be inconvenienced with messes, and instead became a healthy, consequences still in place, navigator of messes? I mean, isn't a dad, isn't a friend, isn't a leader, isn't a teacher, isn't a person, isn't anybody in a relationship, like, isn't a major function like disaster management specialist? And maybe you're someone here who's confused about God. Can we misrepresent him by just focusing on the fact that he's there to navigate our messes for us and with us? Yeah. But still central to the gospel is a God who put you in his creation and wanted you to join him in his creation, and we messed it up. And yet he drew near and says, I'd love to help you navigate the mess. And this is why for 2,000 years Christians have put crosses on walls and around their neck and above their platforms and all other sorts of things, is because the central belief of the text is that the ultimate mess, the ultimate sin, is dealt with through Christ. That he cleaned up a mess that we simply can't on our own. So let me just pray over you and we'll close up. God, thanks for your grace. We're grateful for it and eager to be better givers of it. God, we want your grace to flow through us. Would you help us? And as dads, as we think about this, would you just, for those of us that have kids at home, help us live this out. For those of us that don't, we can still live it out. Help us seek forgiveness where forgiveness needs to be sought. to live in hope and grace and forgiveness otherwise. We love you, Jesus. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.